What's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We are back on the lifted K10. Last time we cut, mocked up, and tacked all the components for our front suspension. And that means that next we are on to the rear. Very similar, obviously no steering back here, but a lot of the same steps. So we're gonna take out this entire rear end as one unit, and that means detaching the shocks, anything that's connected through the rear diff. And then finally we'll just drop the two shackles on either side and the whole thing will come down and roll out of here and give us a nice place to start building with our brand new axle. So we got our whole rear assembly out of that K10, and the first step to now rebuilding is our new axle. This is the APE built axle. What we're gonna do is we're gonna get it leveled on jack stands left to right, and then we could use a third jack stand to set our pinion angle. So we got our axle up on jack stands, all leveled, and our pinion angle set. First step, we got all this bracketry to attach to our new axle. So we've got this plate. It's gonna go, they give you new hardware to attach it into the pinion cover. This bracket gets welded like that. That's your pinion support. Then there's a top bracket, it goes up here, and they bolt together like that. And then this is our truss up here. So right about this will slip into our truss, and then outside the axle tubes on either side are these brackets. This gets positioned with the holes 1 inch up from the center line of the axle. This truss doesn't come welded at all. It's sort of just jigged together and held together with saran wrap. We're gonna start by building this out, and then the whole thing will be ready to be slid under the truck, and we can start to see exactly where our links are gonna line up. So we got one truss and pinion support. It's all bolted together. This is not tacked in yet, but all of our edges are nice and clean, and we are ready for our side support brackets. These guys here, they want it welded as close to the edge as possible, but leaving enough room to get a weld all the way around. All right, so we want to get this under the truck, start building. But something happened to our truck. It's got a lean to it now. Yeah, no bueno, we gotta level this thing out, because this is level. We gotta build everything being even, the heights on either side. Looks pretty good. What do you think?
I think it's everything's coming along real good.
We have our axle positioned and centered, ready to go, start building our links. But before we want to start tacking things, we really want to remove these fuel tanks if we're going to be doing some welding around here. So now that we got our gas tanks out, we're on to building again. And this time we got something a little bit different in the rear. In the front, our links had Johnny joints on either side, and it had a left-hand thread and a right-hand thread, so you could just spin the tube and pull them in and out. These are gonna have Johnny joints on one side, but on the other side it's gonna get this flex joint. So pretty similar concept. It rotates around, gives you some flexibility. So our tubing will get coped and then welded onto here, and then the other side will get the standard Johnny joint insert. So we got our little mock-up here. This part is fully installed. We got the Johnny joint, we got the lock nut, we got our insert into the tubing, and our tubing runs down a nice straight line to here, the flex joint, which is mounted in. Made a couple marks, tried to cut long and short. Great success so far. We got our one link on our axle tube. This is the outer link. going up to there to our johnny joint. And then we got our inner mount running up to the other side of the frame mount. Next step, yes, you guessed it, the other side. Every car seems to have two sides. Who knew? We got both sides all tacked in. So we got our outer mounts, our inner mounts, the other outer mount over there, and our links run to our johnny joints on their mounts that are tacked into the frame on either side. Looking pretty good so far. The next step is our shocks. One mounts to the axle tube and the other mounts to a shock mount, which is gonna go up here. We have a mock shock made up already for this side, right here, sitting there. And we'll put the tabs on the end, we'll put it on the tube and see how far this needs to sit, because right now we're at ride height and our mock shock is at ride height. So we want to set this exactly how it sits right here. We got our shock mounted, tacked in upper bracket, tacked into two tabs, hold the bottom to the axle, and it's at ride height. Next thing to do is the other side. We are under the truck and we are raising up our jack. So we're about to cycle our suspension through its full travel from ride height to full compression and then to full droop. What do you think, Andrew? Nothing's ripping in the wrong direction?
All right, I see a problem already.
Okay.
Our shock body, you can see it's taped up right now, but it's already hitting our bracket. And we still have another 2 inches worth of travel to come up. The angle is gonna wanna come up like this. So this is gonna go a little bit deeper, even more into the bracket. So we'll have to do a little bit of clearancing here. Not too much, but just a small amount. So this is the reason why you have to test fit everything. Okay, we made our adjustment. Dave cut out a little bit more material right here. You can see we have more clearance now. We're past fully compressed. On the axle, you can see there's barely anything sticking out here. Our bump stops are gonna stop us before we get to this point. Now we're gonna start cycling the suspension down into a full droop, and then we'll start articulating it from side to side. Let her down. Oh, keep going. We'll droop out with no issues, really. Our link arms don't interfere with anything.
I guess our next step, we could put this back up to what, around ride height, and then the other one will be at full droop.
I'm seeing an issue.
Yeah.
Yep. The body of the shock on the bottom is touching our tab right here. So as soon as we started moving, the axle, like articulating, it started to rub right in here on both sides. Really what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna have to design something ourselves that doesn't have this area here on the bracket.
So took a little template paper and I came up with this concept. What's good about this design, one, it kicks the shock further away from the axle tube. Secondly, it gives you room to box them in and give it extra strength. We want to make sure that this is extra stout. Here is our test piece. First, check the radius. That looks very nice. You can see that off the axle tube, we're coming out way further than the stock mounts, which gives a nice big distance between the spring and the axle tube. So now that we have this, we can print these out of thicker material, and that should make a nice beefy shock mount. All right, we're ready to start tacking these guys in, but before we do, I just wanted to show on either side, there's a gap. As one side goes up and the other side goes down, this flexible joint inside the shock collar, it wants to move this way and this way. So that's why we had to redesign these brackets to make clearances in this section. But the important part is that since we're at ride height right now, we want these to be as even as possible. So now we're gonna hold this up, tack it in. We tacked on new shock tabs onto the axle.
These aren't tabs, these are mounts.
Mounts.
Those little puny tabs that we had weren't cutting it.
Right, so it's fully in its compressed position. We got plenty of clearance on either side, which we will need because this is still at ride height. Once it goes to full droop, it'll make this angle even more severe. But we're looking pretty good so far. We're gonna bring it down, full droop. Okay, safety first. Okay. Oh, that's it, I think.
Yeah, do plenty of checking when you're doing this kind of suspension or any kind of suspension build, whether it be in the front, if you're fully turned left, fully turned right, fully compressed, fully decompressed, and the same with the rear. Check every scenario.
We pulled everything off of the K10, put it back onto the bench. Before we weld on this, do all this final welding, which generates a ton of heat. We gotta get everything off of this rear end that is susceptible to heat. So we're gonna start tearing it apart. We got almost all the welding done on this rear end. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna do some boxing in. So we'll start with the top size. And took some measurements. It's like 1 5/8, and then we're gonna do 2 inches long. Cut them out, weld them on, flip the axle over. We got our shock brackets boxed in on both sides. We got all our final welds on our supports and our 4-link brackets. This rear diff should be pretty good, ready to be repainted. Next step, we got to start welding the connectors for our johnny joints to our link tube. And on this side, our flex joint to our link tube. So the back's all finished being welded. Now we're moving up to the front. We just have to blow this apart. Taking our link arms off both sides. It means taking our shocks off both sides. It means taking our steering arm off and our panhard bar. And once all of those come off, all the links at the end of the bars need to get welded. We got our front axle here, but before we make a swap here and put it on the bench for welding, we are going to rebuild this. We got our front axle up here on the workbench to be final welded, but much like the rear axle, there's rubber and plastic bits and pieces that would get destroyed by heat buildup. So we're gonna take off our steering, the calipers, take off the rotor hub assembly. Behind the shaft is a seal right in here, and that's what we're worried most about. We are finished welding the front axle housing. So the next step before repainting this is to reassemble. First step, we'll get these seals back in our axle tubes. Then we can put the rear gear set back in, slide our axles back in. Then we got to put in this whole assembly. The springs, the lock washers, the hub gears, everything. We got the front and the rear axles all modified, all the brackets final welded. They're all ready to be painted up and they're gonna look beautiful. Next steps, we left this cab and this bed on here while we were building all this stuff. So that way we could have reference points, we could see where our suspension might hit the body of the vehicle. Now that we're done with the mocking up portion, we're gonna pull this bed off, we're gonna pull the cab off. That way we have access to our frame, we could do our nice final welding.
While he's working on the chassis, I'm gonna start working on our engine. We have an oil pan that we're gonna add into here. It saves us about 2, maybe 3 inches or so of clearance from the bottom, quite a bit shallower in the sump area. I'm gonna start assembling this oil pan right now, so it'll be ready to just bolt on to our engine. So I've completed all the changes that we need to make on our engine packaging, and now I need to move on to the transmission side of things. Behind the LT4, we are putting a 6-speed manual transmission, and we are retaining the 4-wheel drive. So what we have is an adapter that's gonna mate our transfer case to this transmission. This is an RPM built Camaro transmission, hardened input and output shafts, crowd treated gears, and then the tail shaft housing is out of a Corvette, which is a transaxle style. So it has this flat plate on it. Right now I'm gonna start assembling all these pieces onto the transmission, and then we'll be able to bolt it all up, get the engine mounts bolted onto the engine, lower it down, and then we'll be able to build out our transmission cross member. All right, so we're getting the engine set in between the frame rails. A couple things that we want to make sure happen. We have to get it set centered in between the frame rails left to right. And also we have to get our engine mounts close to where the original pads were here. And if I use the stock location for the mount pad, it gives us plenty of room on the back side of the engine. We'll have our engine harness come out through the firewall this area. Lastly, the pitch of the engine in the frame. So we usually set our engines about 4 degrees setback. This one's a little bit different. I was gonna measure up here, but the blower hat on here, it like points downwards to the front, so I couldn't really use that. So I have my angle finder just right here on the dampener on the front, and underneath we have plenty of clearance, it looks like, for our transmission. So we're looking pretty good so far. We're gonna fine tune this, and once we get it to the exact position that we want, we'll be able to start getting our mounts into place. We're level in all access, except for here. I'm at about 5.5 degrees pitch back. I may leave it that way just because it is gonna have a very big lift on it, and it might help keep the drive shaft angle to the back a little less severe on the U-joint. So maybe the 5.5 closer to 6 might be more advantageous for us. So now that it's all located centered, next up is to get mounts installed. Got a measurement of 2.5 inches from the mount bracket hole to the subframe where the mount pad's gonna be. So now I'm just gonna take that measurement over to our universal mount, and I'm just gonna cut this guy right here. All right, got my little guy cut out. Guess I could shorten it up a little bit more. All right, now we gotta do the other side. Oh yeah, beautiful. Now I'm gonna go ahead and tack them in so then we can move to the transmission cross member. Engine mounts are tacked. Now, the next step is to make a transmission / transfer case cross member.
got our piece all tacked together, and now we know that it fits exact since we tacked it all bolted in on 3 points. So we can final weld them up, and then when we put it back on, it'll fit perfect. Okay, we got the final welding done on the cross member, and we put it back in with a couple bolts just to hold it in place, make sure everything lined up. It looks really good. It's extremely sturdy, which is nice. So there'll be a lot of horsepower running through this thing.
All right, we've got all of our rear chassis fabrication completed. Our rear axle is in, our suspension is sitting on the floor. Also, we've got our engine mounts completed, our transmission mounts completed. We wanted to get this thing on the ground to get a really good view of what it's gonna start looking like, and it looks really cool. I'm excited about it. We've also started boxing in the frame. I know a lot of you guys were concerned about what was happening with the boxing of the frame. We're gonna finish off that stuff on the next episode, and then also we're gonna be doing some cab modifications. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, and make sure you stay tuned. See you guys on the next episode. Peace.